because actually I do have a meeting at 10. I need to respect. So we're moving from Milan to Zaragoza in Spain, and we're going to have Cristina Sarraza from the University of Zaragoza tell us more about sectoral employment structure and gender inequality, a global perspective. Andrea, thank you so much for being with us. And Cristina, thank you so much also for accepting to be with us today. Do you have the capacity to upload your presentation, Cristina? Can you verify that it works?
Okay, I am going to check. It's okay, no?
Perfect. Yes, I can hear you very well, and I can see your work. So, Cristina, whenever you're ready, it's all yours. Thank you for being with us, Cristina.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for your invitation. Sorry for my delay because I don't know, but I was confused with the time, so sorry again. As commented, thank you very much for the invitation and your assistance. I'm Cristina, as Sandy says, and I am going to present a work in which I work together with my colleague Rosa Duarte and Monica Serrano from Spain as well. In this work, we analyze the employment patterns of the jobs in the global world from a gender perspective, using a multi-regional and multi-sectoral input-output model. So the main objective is to evaluate the differences in jobs with a gender perspective, and in order to say what we can to say with this methodology. So this is the scheme of the presentation. Mainly, firstly, we are going to present the topic and the contribution of this work. Then we are going to present the methodology we have used and the main results we have obtained. So the main results in gender literature that is related with the economic structure have previous premises related, for instance, to the relevant role of women to support life as agriculture, specifically in developing countries, the need of structural transformations in Africa, the differences in the discriminatory social norms and practice in the gender inequality in the Arab world, as for instance the well-known exclusion of unpaid work, unpaid domestic work from the systems of accounts. But we can observe that the study of the specialization of economies for the generation of the persistence of the gender employment gap has been mostly overlooked. So with this work, we want to contribute to the literature using a multi-regional input-output model in order to connect economic structure in the world. With this model, we are able to analyze the differences in the direct generation of jobs, so with the production perspective, and to analyze the differences with these jobs with the employment that is generated due to the final demands of peoples in the different regions and sectors. So with this, we want to have a better understanding of gender inequality through the evaluation of the women's work in all regions of the world, and to analyze the relationship with the structure of the economy. To do it, we are going to explore the employment patterns by sector and by country in 2 years, in 1991 and in 2019. And we are going to observe the differences in the evolution of gender employment gaps, and we are going to address a structural decomposition analysis in order to obtain the different factors that could affect to these differences in gender. So with our main objective, as commented, is to evaluate the contribution of women's work to the economy, to identify factors that could hinder gender equality, as well as the different driving forces that could increase these gender differences. So the main methodology we have used is a multi-regional input-output model for the global economy that is disaggregated in 26 sectors and almost 200 countries. With this input-output model, we have a link, the relationship between the production in all sectors and countries with the demand side. And we have through the Leontief inverse that allow us to observe the generation of the direct generation and indirect incorporated in the final demand of each sector. And we are going to extend this model to include the labor perspective. So we are going to use employment data from the International Labour Organization by sector and by country, and to extend the female labor vector and male labor vector. So then we are going to, we obtain the different metrics where we have the information related to jobs, direct jobs in the economy, so the production perspective, and the jobs that are incorporated in the final demand due to the final demands of the different jobs and countries. So we have two perspectives for the same total number of jobs, a production perspectives and a demand perspectives. So the tables are obtained from GEORA database, and the employment data are combined with information from the International Labour Organization. Additionally, we are going to analyze the gender employment gap as the ratio between the total participation of men and women in jobs. And we are going to analyze as well the gender embodied employment gap. So the gender differences in the direct jobs and the gender differences in the embodied jobs. So in other words, the gender differences in jobs created in the economy due to through the supply chain in the global world, through due to the demand of the different sectors and countries. So if this ratio our values are close to zero, there is this, it's said that there is no gender gap, so we have a equality situation. But if these figures are close to 1, it indicates us that we have a greater gender gap. So additionally, we want to decompose the different components of the in between both years in order to analyze which factors are provoking more or less gender inequality, at least. So we can, and we have the intensity effect that is related to changes in labor productivity, a technology effect, and as well the demand effect related to changes in consumption patterns, income, population, economic growth, and so on. And as we are going to compare the situation between 1991 and 2019, is we apply a simple average of the two polar solutions, we can approximate to the situation in both. So we are going to, we can analyze how changes in the different components in intensity, technology, and demand effect could contribute to a more or less gender inequality embodied in the production chain of the different work on the different products and services. And as well as we can analyze by rows how the evolution of the different effects could contribute to changes in gender employment gap. So we are going to sum up the main results that we have obtained, or the more interesting results. So, here we have the top sectors that help to create where people are working as well. And in this figure, we have the direct situation, and up below we have embodied jobs. So we can observe that in 1991, the main sectors where people are working was agriculture, which is even relevant in 2019. But we can find disparities by gender. For instance, we can observe that the majority of sectors are masculinized, while the only one sector that is feminicized is education and health. Indeed, if we analyze the main sectors where people that help to job creation, we can see that the demand of food and beverage, and even the demand of hotels and restaurants help to job creation in addition to the agriculture. Again, we can observe that the demand of the different sectors and countries also provokes horizontal segregation, where we have different sectors that are more dominated by men, and the only one sector that we can see that is dominated by women could be education and health. Indeed, we can observe in this period a change to a structural change towards a more industrial and service-oriented economy. Additionally, if we analyze the distribution indices in these years, in both cases, we can see again that the majority of sectors are dominated by men, and the only one sector that is dominated by women are education and health in the global economy. And if we analyze the situation with the embodied jobs, we can observe that the demand the demand of the different sectors provokes again a larger horizontal segregation. So with this, if we analyze the situation in the different countries, the top list of countries are these that we have here. And we can see that indeed the 40% of people, workers are working in China and India, not expected. And then it is followed by the USA. But this relevance is decreasing in 2019, and especially for women. Indeed, if with this top list of countries, we can see that the situation there are differences between male and female jobs. For instance, the situation of Pakistan that is different for men and women. And indeed, we can observe that these top 10 countries generated 35% less female jobs than male jobs in 1991, and this difference is even increasing in 2019. Additionally, if we observe how the demand of the different countries help to create jobs, we can see that the demand, as expected, of China, India, and the USA are the countries that involve more job generation, and even we can observe that is slightly lower than the direct jobs. So with this, if we analyze the balance of jobs, indeed, if a country have more direct job than embodied job, then they are going to classify as exporters of jobs. Even if we have countries that have more embodied jobs than direct jobs, are going to have importers of jobs. So in these maps, we can observe the situation in 1991, and we can see that developing countries in Asia, for instance, are mainly exporters of jobs, are mainly exporting male jobs more than female jobs. And by contrast, developed countries in North America, Europe, and Oceania are mainly importers of jobs. So mainly they are importing male jobs. If we observe the situation in 2019, we can see, for instance, that countries in Asia are much more labor intensive because they are more exporters of jobs, but at the same time, they are increasing their embodied jobs, so they are more interdependent. This, by contrast, developed countries, for instance, in North America and Europe, are less intensive in labor. If we observe the situation in India, we can see that India is reducing its export-oriented nature of the case of female jobs. Now we are going with this analyze the differences in gender inequality in these 2 years. Indeed, if we analyze the gender employment gaps by country in both years, in this figure, we have here the global average for the global economy, and we can see that the largest gender employment gap are observed in countries in Middle East, for instance, in Pakistan, in Asia, in Egypt, in different countries, even in the north of Africa, in Morocco, and in some countries in Asia, for instance, in India, which is here. Additionally, we can observe that it's China and India we can remind that they have around 40% of total jobs are increasing their gender gap from 1991 to in this 2019, while the majority of countries is reducing. So due to this fact, we are going to analyze the decomposition of the gender employment gap without including China and India. Indeed, we have here the figures for China here that we can see that the gender employment gap is increasing in this period, while in the case of India it's even increasing, but with very high level. Here we can observe the composition of gender employment gap and the different effects and by sectors. Indeed, we can see that the level of the gender gap is high in 1991 and 2019, and we can observe a persistence in the gender inequality because we can see only a small reduction of 10% in this period. And this reduction is due to the demand contraction that we can observe from the economy and improvements in technology, but by contrast, we can observe an increase in labor requirements. If we analyze the situation of the different sectors, we can see that sectors that are dominated by men, we present a high level of gender inequality, for instance, the case of construction, and even we can see that different service sectors are increasing their gender gap. If we analyze the situation the gender inequality due to the demand of the different sectors, we can, and the different sectors and jobs without including China and India, we can see that even the situation, the gender inequality is reducing with a low percentage. So we can see again the same effects, but we can see, for instance, that the demand, for instance, of food and beverage, different sectors, for instance, how hotel and restaurant, retail trade, or financial intermediation has provoked a larger gender gap than the direct jobs that are related in these sectors. So, for instance, the structural transformation that we are observing related to moving to service sectors could lead to even increase the gender gap if women are not reallocated in these sectors. Even if we analyze the situation in China and India, including in these figures, we can observe that indeed the gender inequality is increasing in both cases. So gender employment gap is increasing due to the economic growth of these economies. The technological change is increasing, but in this case, the labor requirements are decreasing in these cases. And we can analyze the different situation by sectors as well. So if we analyze in this last slide the situation for all the different countries and in the main sectors, we can see that developed countries and developing countries are increasing their gender employment gap in service sectors. We can see that the situation in the agriculture sector in developing countries is the gender inequality in agriculture is being reduced. And in the case of construction sectors, both in developed and developing countries are reducing the inequality, but it's very slow. So the main conclusion that we have observed, that is the male jobs is much greater than female jobs as expected. A first limitation of this conclusion is the lack of information of women working in care work or domestic work as well. We have observed a clear horizontal segregation with a clear masculinization of the economy, especially in the case of construction sector. And the only one sector that is feminized is education and health. And this situation is intensified in this period. We have observed additionally developed countries in North America and Europe are importers of female jobs, while the situation in developing countries in Asia and Latin America are exporters of female jobs. There is a structural transformation toward the generation of jobs in secondary and tertiary jobs, but the relevance of agriculture is still relevant. Indeed, the gender inequality in the gender differences in jobs is increased, it persists. We have observed the relevance of the analysis to include the perspective demand in order to analyze how the difference, the demand of the different products could cause a larger or a lower gender inequality through the global supply chain. And the gender employment gaps in agriculture and industry sector is reduced, while in service sector is increasing. And we have observed large data that gender gaps in countries being located in the Middle East, in Asia, and in North Africa. So our main challenges that we can observe from this work is that we need to review and improve data and statistical sources related to include care and domestic work in order to, for instance, analyze the global care chains. We need also to improve employment data, including skills, for instance, in order to be aware of the related horizontal segregation, and as well even to be able to analyze vertical segregation, and of course to include qualitative variables, because in different parts of the world the analysis of the influence of norms, religions, and culture could be relevant to analyze the participation of women in the economy. So thank you very much for your assistance.
Gracias, Cristina. Thank you so much. Very interesting work. So I have two questions for you.
Okay.
The first question I have is that you have obviously used an employment input coefficient, basically the number of employees by gender for every single sector and every single country of your sample, which is already an enormous amount of work to collect. My question is this. Is there by any chance access to similar data, but that will instead capture labor income? So what I'm trying to say is, you can have in a specific sector of country, you can have a man and a woman working, but it could be that the woman is simply paid less than the man. We see, for instance, in the US, that several studies have already shown that on average, women will earn 70 cents for every dollar that a man will do, even so they are equally qualified for the job and so on and so forth. So in other words, is it possible to transform that to labor income input coefficient as opposed to employment input coefficients? That's my first question. Second question is, do you mind to go over one more time what is the source of your data set for those employment data? I did not catch it. And I'm more especially curious as to whether it's possible to add elements such as experience, education. I mean, it's just a very interesting data set that you have on that employment by gender, sector, and country. Thank you so much, Cristina.
Thank you very much for your questions. Related to the first questions, it is just very challenging, and it is very interesting to analyze the gender pay gap. If we could have the different wages for sectors and countries, that is our second step. We would like to analyze the difference in wages. So that is called a gender pay gap. Indeed, data and the number of jobs, in this case, we have obtained from the International Labour Organization to analyze the situation for there are almost 200 countries. So it's difficult to have information related wages for all sectors, but it would be very interesting. But in other case, we can approximate with a lower number of regions in this case, but almost but in this case the analysis, even the vulnerability of jobs, is even interesting in this regard. And additionally, for the second questions, yes, of course, we would like to implement this additional question related to the experience, related with the different skills of women, in order to connect with this model, in order to then be able to design different policies that could focus in the different parts of the regions and countries.
Perfect, Cristina. Very interesting work again. We're going to open the floor for additional questions, and I just wanted to apologize to the two of you because I have to go to a new meeting in 1 minute, but we're going to leave the meeting open so that questions can carry on. So before I go, I'd like very much to thank you, Andrea, grazie mille, and to thank you too, muchísimas gracias, because it's been absolutely tremendous work. Let's collect some questions from the floor. Please just unmute yourself.
Yeah, can I ask you some question? Joaquin, hi Cristina. Thank you for your presentation, very nice. Just some observations because and some suggestions maybe will help you in your work because you are working with a very big database with a lot of countries, and what happened is the years you are taking 1991 2019 probably the data for the input output tables they are not um, so good in quality because actually these are years that have a lot of problems. Actually, we don't have tables for 2019 and 91. It's missing a lot of IO tables for you to build the system. So a lot of these are estimated. So one suggestion for you is maybe instead of trying to work with so many countries, try to spot which are the main countries in terms of trade or where you want to focus and reduce the number of countries so you can get better database. Also for the ILO, there have some problems in terms of the classification of the jobs, you know that, and the data not so good for some countries. So maybe instead of working so many countries, you might want to filter a little bit, reduce the size of your system, and maybe thinking about choosing some years where you think the data is better. I know it's interesting to see a long time and see what things change, but sometimes your overall conclusion, I think they are fine, it's in the right direction. But when you go into details, that's where you miss important information. And maybe it would be better if you, instead of you working with two so distant point in times, if you could focus maybe more like 2018 or 95 or 2000, maybe close a little bit your time lag so you can improve the quality of your data. And instead of work so many regions, maybe you can aggregate the more problematic countries into a region like Africa, or maybe split out some important countries in Africa. So in doing that, you might be refining the quality, like Sandy mentioned about having data in terms of the income of the labor force and the wages and salaries. And so you can have more detail in your analysis with less countries. Because you have the overall picture, you can use that as an introduction. And then based on that, you can reduce the size of, just as a suggestion, we'll talk with Rosa, your co-authors, and maybe you can discuss about having a more consistent database, and based on that, you can make a better analysis in terms of what really is happening with the human labor force. But that's just a suggestion.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I agree. I totally agree with this. The reason that to include all regions and sector is that our first objective was what happened in the world and which differences we can observe if we analyze a demand perspective in comparison with a production perspective. Then we observe the relevance of China and India, and then the situation in other developing countries as well. So with this first approximation, we wanted to have a previous overview of the situation. And as we agree, if we want to focus on salaries, on the differences in salaries, the difference in the different countries, we have to reduce the countries and even the sectors in order to have data, improved data. So thank you very much for your suggestions and recommendations.
Just one additional suggestion, make an advertisement. Pretty soon, OECD will release a new system of SAO from 95 until 2018 for 67 countries, 45 industries, and it's I would say nice job.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just make advertise of the work. So maybe this database will be very consistent in terms of export, import, and FAO. Maybe you can consider that in your work. And also, there is a work on the OECD by Peter Orvart and Colin Webb and Norieki Yamano on the employment on the global value chains. So it's a paper from 2020, from last year. And there is also a database on OECD on employment in volume trade that has information on employment and wages and salary. It's not split on woman and men, but for overall. But in the STAN database from OECD, they have some information on gender. So just some database might be helpful in our work, just a suggestion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Christina, this is Jeff Hewings. Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. In fact, Andre, too, it's been delightful to spend an hour with you this morning in Chicago. My concern is that one of the problems is you in your, I think one of your concluding slides, you mentioned the role of culture and social aspects. And I'm wondering whether you could think about developing something analogous to what I think The Economist does every year, talking about a competitiveness index or how open a country is or the degree to which laws are enacted. Because I think that that is very, very important. And I think you can say country A is not doing as well as country B, but if the institutional structure is not there, then it's not surprising that you've got much more discrimination and much more inequality. And I think that would be very helpful. And I was just reflecting as you were talking about my experience in Bangladesh, where all of the equivalent of the assistant professors in the university were women, but none of the people above that rank were women. And I asked people, and there was a lot of, sort of somewhat embarrassment about this, but that sort of reflects something which is not because women don't want to get promoted, but there's an institutional structure that prevents them. So I think if you could look at the data, perhaps some of the stuff that Joachim just mentioned, and see whether you could develop something, because I think that might be important. And then what you can do is characterize countries into groups, some sort of club analysis that reflects different propensities. And I think this would really enrich what is already a very wonderful piece of work and to make it much more valuable for our policy analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your suggestions. Yes, I agree. I think that the culture is relevant. So in this case, the role of the different institutions in the different countries are affecting to the different gender inequalities. So that we need is, in this case, to connect with, for instance, another, to link to these models with another econometric models to be able to analyze the relevance of these factors in these countries, for instance. And I agree because if we sum up the results, we have the results sum up by different groups of countries and by income. We have the results are more clear, more or less. But indeed, yes, we have a lot of data and a lot of results, but we have presented here the global situation. But indeed, if we analyze the situation by group of countries, it could be clear in order to have a response to know what happened with this. Thank you very much.
I think Roberto is talking, but you have the mic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mute
No problem.
myself. Yeah. I was curious, Christina, about the database you use this EORA database? Is it a free database that everyone can download, or is it has to be bought?
No, EORA is free. We have used this data for the economic structure just to use for the input-output tables, but then we have obtained the, if we use by research, this database is free. But then we have combined with the employment data from the international.
Yeah. I know I was interested in this multi-regional input-output database because I have something going on with COVID and input-output that could benefit from it. If I can, maybe I would go back to asking a small question to Andrea on the previous paper, because if can I?
Please.
Okay.
I mean,
no, Andrea, a very interesting paper. I was curious about the structure equation model you estimated, because then you mentioned SUR, similarity regressions. But normally when people estimate a structure equation model, a SEM, they do it because they're interested in using the factor analysis, let's say, part of the model, where you can incorporate many variables as sometimes exogenous, sometimes endogenous variables through factors. So I was wondering if you guys used the factor analysis part of SEM, or you just went for a straight single variable, no factors type of approach.
Thank you, Roberto. We can't stop recording, can we? I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. The truth be,
we are live on Facebook.
We're live on Facebook, so it's even worse than that. No, seriously, we came actually quite short of time with this very last segment. So we are dedicating roughly 1 year for each segment of this paper, and this is the 4th year. So for year 1 goes to rent, year 2 goes to productivity, year 3 goes to wages, and year 4 hopefully
but you can say what's
to...
in the plan.
Yes. So technically we had troubles in actually carrying out the proper structural equation model. So we just wanted to show you. Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, it's just hopefully.
No, I mean, SEM is very delicate. Structural equation models are extremely delicate.
Yes. So and of course we are very open to suggestions. Our idea here would be to somehow rule out the endogeneity that is embedded in the spatial equilibrium across these 3 indicators, right? And and this thing that we've been assuming some of these feedback away from empirical models simply does not make sense, because there is a clear hint of some relationships there, but we would like to wipe out what is endogenous from what is exogenous. So I think the structural equation model proper with the path analysis would be the best way, but we haven't come up with a proper outcome yet. So basically, sure, to give you a more precise feedback, is just a proxy for our long run target.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ciao, Andrea.
Hi, Rafa. Hi, Rafael.
Sorry that I cannot turn on my video, but it's for the sake of all of you.
Yeah, don't worry. I can switch mine off too, if you wish.
I have one question for you, Andrea, and one question for you, Cristina. Hola, Cristina, por cierto. For Andrea, have you tried including a variable like, for example, insecurity? Because my colleagues and I did a similar paper of amenities using ROBAC in Mexico, and find out that insecurity, as you know, in Mexico is one big problem right now. And that was one big complication that we were having in Mexico, no? That were scaring people out of the cities, no? We did the study only in the most important cities, and that was what we found. And I would like your impression of if you think it will be a good idea to include in your model insecurity. We use homicides, no, related to violent crimes, no, with the drug cartels that we have there in Mexico, unfortunately. And for you, Cristina, I think what the Joaquin and also Jeff told you is very good, because one of the big problems that we also did a paper in gender issues in Mexico, we find out two things. One, as Joaquin mentioned, not all the information that INEGI, which is the statistical institute in Mexico, is trustable. Unfortunately, it's recording this conversation, but they know that some of the data is not pristine. And the other problem that we have is, as Jeff mentioned, and also Joaquin, one, you show first the Middle Eastern countries, no, the Arab countries, to call it in other ways, after the Asian countries and also the Latin American countries. I think that it will be better if you divide them into different groups, because the characteristics are completely different. No, as you know, Mexico, we have a lot of this machismo culture, no, that makes us different from the rest, and it's one thing that we are trying to get rid of, but unfortunately we haven't been able to. No, and the other thing is, as Joaquin mentioned, probably to use other years, no, probably closer. I don't know if there is information available, or probably the other good thing will be, as Joaquin mentioned, to once you show the whole world, to spot just some of the countries, no, and analyze probably in following papers what is the case of, for example, India, no, that it has an increase in the gap, no, or Pakistan. Then it will be good to have that differences, and that's it for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafael. Cristina, do you want to feedback first?
Yes, yes, I agree with Rafael. Indeed, yes, we know that a main challenge is the statistics. So the statistics of this type of data in the International Labour Organization, we don't have data for all years for all countries, and we have analyze this situation just for these countries, even if we focus on low countries and a small number of countries, and we can obtain the information related to salaries that is relevant in this topic. But indeed, as commented, we want to show the results by level of income in different groups of countries, that it could be so clearer the type of result that we can obtain with this analysis. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Cristina. Gracias.
Okay.
Now to you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you. Could you please check, because I have two replies. One is a silly one and one is a serious one. The first is silly. Could you please check on the chat? While you were finishing your question to Cristina, I found an old meme, an old, probably a couple of years old meme that a Dutch rugby teammate of mine had uploaded a couple of years ago on Facebook. So the title is Ik kom van de straat, which means I come from the street, I live in the streets, this is my place. And it's a hip hop verse of a Dutch rapper. And it shows actually how streets look like in the Netherlands. So it's not exactly, I mean, in a silly way, we may say it's not exactly the most dangerous place on earth to live, and the crime, these amenities probably are, with all due respect, lower than in Mexico or in Italy, by the way, where we're going more towards your side and towards the Dutch side. Unfortunately, if we try and get serious, I know for sure that Amsterdam actually has an awful homicide rate, precisely because of drugs, because this is one of the harbors where drug is actually entering continental Europe, especially from South America. And just to be, we're all friends here, with the help of the Italian 'Ndrangheta, which is the crime organization from Calabria. So it may be a problem, and I honestly believe that it's a very good suggestion that I never thought of. I mean, there may be probably some correlation with some of the variables that we already control for in our regressions, right? Because some of the things that probably control for environmental quality are also inversely correlated with the local crime rates, but probably not necessarily, right? I mean, in some downtowns, you would have a lot of drug smuggling and petty crimes that could be actually affecting the output of the firms, the workers, and the consumers. So it's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Any other question?
No. So thank you for everyone. See you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again for hosting us. Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye
you very
everyone.
much.
Bye bye.
Bye.